Okay, so you don't have to start over. Robert's already read verses 1 through 3. Go ahead. So let's start over on 4.
Cool. Testing 1, 2, 3. Children whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom and cunning and knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning in the tongue of the Chaldeans, or Chaldeans, however you want to say that. Chaldeans?
Chaldeans or Chaldeans.
Chaldeans. Gotcha. Awesome. Thank you, Don. Verse 5. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were of the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belshazzar. There you go.
Belshazzar. And here I'll pronounce these. So it's the name of Belshazzar, and Hananiah is Shadrach, Mishael is Meshach, and Azariah is Abednego. So awesome. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
And I just met a Sister Mishael. But Daniel proposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink. For why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head of the king. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, and as though it ceased, deal with the servants. So he consented to them in this matter, and proved them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Now at the end of the days that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed with them. And among them all was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore stood they before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in all his realm. And Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen again. All right. So in that first verse, it got me thinking, and I kind of ended up going down a rabbit hole. So it says, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. So, it was when he said something about Tammuz. what was it? And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, which part of the vessel carried unto the, spake unto the eunuchs. Crap, where was it that I was like, I think I did some research on what month or in year that he took over Jerusalem. And that's when I noticed it was in 9 Tammuz. So Tammuz, I don't know if you know anything about it. Tammuz is the child of the sun god Nimrod. And I was like, why are the Hebrews having like naming a month after like a pagan god? So I kind of went down this rabbit hole. So a lot of our stuff and like Gentile stuff, and a lot of Hebrew rituals and things come from Babylonia because they were in exile for so long there. So Tammuz is on the 4th month of the Hebrew calendar, and Tammuz 17 begins a 3rd week morning that continues until the 9th of Av, which is the fast day that commemorates the destruction of the 2 Jewish temples. So 9 Tammuz is when King Nebuchadnezzar breached the walls of Jerusalem. And then prior to the destruction, which is prior to the destruction of the first temple, the Jews would fast on the 9th. But after breaking the wall of the second temple on 17 Tammuz, the day of fasting changed to the 17th. So I kind of went through and I'm like, what is going on here? Because the Jews have 13 months, not 12. And I noticed like 4 of them were historically kind of like Hebrew months, and then the rest, I don't know. I wanted to know like where each month got its name, like what the origins were and everything. And so I didn't quite go into which days of our calendar months coincide with the Jewish calendar months, but like the first month is Nisan, which is Passover. So this is the first month in April sometime. Is when the first month begins. And then let's see, AR represents another step in the Jewish spiritual journey towards Sinai. And the 3rd month is Sivan. So I think it was these names, the Sine, I guess, were Jewish names, and then the ones in the parentheses were the Babylonian names. And so as you see here, like the 4th month is Tammuz, is the beginning of the destruction of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. 5th month is Av, which is the 1st and 2nd Holy Temples were destroyed. Elul is the month of repentance, mercy, and forgiveness. The month of Tishrei is the 1st month of the Jewish year. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Keshvan is taking the inspiration and all that the Jews gained in the month of Tishri and integrating it into their lives. Kislev, Hanukkah begins, and New Year of Demism. I don't know. So there are certain like celebrations that the Jews do that are not mentioned in the Torah. But what they've done is they've incorporated the pagan celebrations in Babylonia and twisted it, kind of like what we've done with Christmas, with Easter. They've also done. The 11th month is Shavat. For the Jews, this wasn't a celebration per se, but used as a marker. So the 15th day of this month would be when the fields would be at its most, at its moistest and most fertile. So it would almost be like a farmer's almanac type of thing. And then they would tithe their first fruits to the temple. I keep thinking you're smiling at me and you're standing really still.
Yes, I am.
That's your
I
picture.
was trying
You're like,
Yeah.
But the first fruits of
How's it going? Sorry.
is Kabbalah. So they've taken this, and this is where Kabbalah, the Talmud, all of these Jewish mysticism rituals are incorporated, which are very satanic. Those are like synagogue of Satan type stuff. So there is no new year for trees. There's no celebration to the trees, and that's almost very, very paganistic, because you're worshiping trees now instead of worshiping the creator of the trees.
Almost like evolution, right? Or humanism, kind of.
Almost like Wicca. It's like Wicca, because you're worshiping nature.
True. I'll share this with you about that Zion. A few years ago, have you heard of Cornerstone Church? Perhaps John Hagee. Yeah. I was a part of his church for about a month, and I can share with you this. Even as ignorant as I am in the Bible, very understudied. I'll use that word. Even though being upon that church, I'm in the middle. Literally, I'm in the middle of people who have like $2,000 checks thrown into the contribution of the offering plate. And I've got my piddly little $5. But I'll share this with you. Something didn't seem right, didn't fit right with me. So I left that church. I no longer participated with it. Just something didn't sit right. And later on, I come to find out, here we are. They are that of a Zion type of church.
Yep. It's no bueno, man.
So
yeah. This 2-bit Shabbat, this is like the new year for trees. This celebration is not mentioned in the Bible or Torah, but is found in the Talmud. So 500 years ago, the Kabbalists created a Seder meal of various tree fruits and wine, representing the mystical 4 worlds. And you would eat 10 specific fruits and drink 4 cups of wine in a specific order while reciting an appropriate blessing. And it would bring human beings in the world closer to spiritual perfection. It's very new agey. And the new year for trees is tree worship or nature worship, which is not what we're supposed to do. The Seder meal is very ritualistic, very much witchcrafty. And we know that Jesus is the only one that can bring us like that spiritual perfection when we are washed clean in his blood. And so they're saying, oh, well, we're being washed clean, we're washing the earth clean and all this kind of stuff and doing all of these rituals, and they're leaving Christ completely out of it. So it says, though the Talmud mentions the Tu B'Shavat as the new year for trees, it does not record it as a celebration. The Kabbalists were the ones who turned it into like this satanic ritual. Then you had 12th month was Adar, which is the spirit of Purim. This represents the story of Esther when Haman was hanged, and the royal edict allowed the Jews to attack their enemies on the 13th day of Adam. And it permeates the entire month, making it a time of unparalleled rejoicing and good mazel. Well, I always like in joking, I'll say, oh, mazel tov or something like that. Well, language is witchcraft, just like our language, the English language, is used as spells to place upon us. the same with the Jews. They've taken these words like mazel, which is let's see, mazel came from the Talmud, meaning fortune. And then the Jewish mystics named it for the zodiac sign, mazalat, and astrology. And in the Bible, in the Old Testament, they were told to stay away from astrology. Astronomy, good. Astrology, bad. Then the 13th month was Adar Bet, which is the Jewish leap year. So I noticed.
John.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what you're talking about, the words that come out of your, it's kind of like similar to what Christ says. It's not what goes in your stomach, but yet what comes out of your mouth. I can't remember exactly what scripture that is, but
it's not
it's
what
right
goes
there, like
into
you're
you
saying.
that defiles your mouth, or that defiles you. It's what comes out of your mouth that defiles you.
Exactly.
And I noticed that, like, a lot of these celebrations were of like destruction and of their what do you call it, of their imprisonment by their enemies, basically. But the thing that the Jewish people never really got was that when you read the Old Testament, every time they were handed over to their enemies, it was because they were practicing pagan worship. And so he'd say, fine, you don't want me? That's fine. Then you can be ruled by these gods and the people that worship these gods. And he would put them in exile under the rule of these people, and they would be oppressed. And then they would cry out, oh God, please come save us. We're so sorry. And he would send someone to come save them. And then for maybe like a generation, they'd be fine. But then the next generation would go right back into pagan worship. And it was this cycle, and God kept sending them. And if you read Judges, Samuel, and Kings, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, that's pretty much, well, actually, it's more like Judges and Samuel. That's pretty much what happened. Like they just kept screwing up. God would put them in the hands of their enemies to try to teach them a lesson, and then he would save them when they were like, okay, we know we did wrong, come save us. And then they would go right back into their sin. So, I mean, it's a story of us all. We keep going right back into our sin. When things are good, when things are nice, we want to dabble, we want to compromise, we want to, give in a little. And that is the slippery slope, which I believe happened to us because we incorporated pagan worship, Christmas, Easter, Halloween, all this kind of stuff. We've incorporated it into the Christian celebrations. And that is where the compromise starts, that the slope starts to get very slippery. And you end up, before you know it, you're waist deep in the muck and mire of it all. So anyways, that I kind of went off on this rabbit hole in looking to try to find out what year this all happened. Okay, so we know that on the 9th of Tammuz, Jerusalem fell and was destroyed, and the Jews were then deported to Babylon. And so I wrote, it seems to me that the Jewish people love to celebrate their persecutions by their enemies as a way to make themselves the victim instead of realizing that they were being persecuted because they thumbed their nose at God and started worshiping pagan gods instead. Thus, God gave them over to their enemies as judgment. God would also show them mercy and save them out of the hands of these enemies, but they would continue to turn their backs on him after a few decades. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, was one such enemy, where God ordained him to overtake Jehoiakim, king of Judah. So Nebuchadnezzar took the vessels out of the house, the temple, which was the house of God, and placed them in his pagan temples. And then King Nebuchadnezzar also took captive the people of Judah and ordered his master of eunuchs to find those Jews who were of the King Jehoiakim seed, and very wise and knowledgeable and well educated in sciences and stuff in their own realm, and bring them over into the king's realm. And then basically what he was going to do is he's going to teach this kind of group of boys the Chaldean knowledge and the Babylonian knowledge and stuff. And then at the end, they would test them all and see who basically was the wisest of them. And then he would bring them on to his kingly staff and put them on retainer. And they would also, they would be taken into King Nebuchadnezzar's palace to educate them in the Babylonian ways and teach them their tongue, the language of the Chaldeans. And they were to be given, they were to be given a portion of the king's meat and of their wine. Okay. So all this was to be done for a 3-year period. And at the end, like I said, the Jewish men would stand before the king and he would pick out the brightest and strongest out of all of them to serve him in his court. So there were 4 boys in particular that dedicated their lives to God. That was Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And then the prince of the eunuchs, his name was Melzar, and they changed their names to Belshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So Daniel, it looked like Daniel was the oldest of the 4 boys, and he was probably around 17 or 18 when they were taken captive. And then the other 3 boys were probably 14 to 16 years of age. So they were all fairly young. And then to be considered a young man, of course, bat mitzvah, you had to be at least 13. So those boys had to be between 13 and 16, they assume. The consensus is. And the consensus was on the internet that Daniel was around 17, 18. And which is why probably Daniel was always the one to kind of speak up and go to Belshazzar and ask, or Melzar, and ask him these questions and stuff. So Daniel and the boys didn't want to defile themselves with the king's meat and drink. And since Daniel was older, the 3 boys probably looked up to Daniel for his wisdom and guidance regarding these matters. So there were a couple of reasons for why they didn't want to defile themselves on the meat and the drink. One was that their food and drink was often offered to their gods, their pagan gods first, before they would eat it. Another one was that they would eat food that the Jews in their custom would not eat, like ham, bacon, all this kind of stuff, or unclean animals. And pork was a choice meat for the Babylonians. And then the Babylonian cooks probably prepared their food with a lot of spices and all that kind of stuff, which the Jewish diet was very almost bland. And so their foods were probably much spicier and richer. It's like us going to France and eating all of their thick cheeses and stuff like that. And especially, me, I already have stomach issues. And so I try to eat as bland as possible. And if you go into another country and eat like spicy foods or something like that, you're going to get sick and you're going to be in bed, like having stomach issues. So, they probably wanted to stay away from that food for that another specific reason was because it would make them feel sluggish and miserable and all that kind of stuff. So and then Daniel asked Melzar if they could be allowed to refrain from this king's portion. And so, but the prince was concerned that if they didn't eat these really good, protein-filled foods, that they would end up like wasting away. They would drop a lot of weight and they would look sluggish and just not good. And then Melzar would be in trouble because he was to look over these boys and make sure that they grew up strong and hardy and stuff. And so his head would literally be on the line if these boys all of a sudden started wasting away. So which is why Daniel was like, okay, look, just give us 10 days, see if we get weaker. And then if we do, we'll go ahead and we'll eat the food. But if we don't, then, let us continue eating this way. And it says pulse. So pulse is, where is it? I think it's like vegetables. Pulse was vegetables. Okay, so Daniel asked for a period of 10 days to prove to him that abstaining from the king's food and drink would not harm them physically or mentally. He pleaded permission for all four men to be allowed to eat only pulse, which is vegetables and food specifically from the ground, and drink water only. Then at the end of the 10 days, Melzar could measure them up physically against those who did partake of the king's portions, and then he can make his judgment, and they would be okay with whatever judgment Melzar came up with. So, because God had put it on the prince's heart to find favor and kindness towards Daniel, he agreed to the trial period. Turned out at the end of the 10 days that they had much better disposition. They were much happier and fatter than all the young men who had eaten from the king's portion. And so Melzar allowed them to continue to eat this way. And this is why when people say, are you going on a Daniel fast? It's usually you don't eat until after like 5 o'clock, and you're only doing vegetables and water. So because of their obedience to God, the boys' obedience to God, he supplied them with knowledge, skill, and in all learning and wisdom in their educational studies. And Daniel had a gift of being able to interpret dreams, which will come beneficial later. And he was able to see visions, while waking visions and sleeping visions. And after the 3-year period, the king ordered all the men before him to be examined. And when Nebuchadnezzar questioned the lot of them, he found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They were not only 10 times wiser than all the other Jewish men, but they were also found to be more knowledgeable than even his highest ranking magician or astrologer. And though Daniel had gone through a period of trials, he remained faithful, and God rewarded his faithfulness by placing him in a high-ranking position throughout his lifetime, all the way up to King Cyrus's first year in power, which was the monarch that actually ended the Babylonian captivity and decreed that the temple of Jerusalem be rebuilt. And we all know of King Cyrus. And then Daniel actually ended up dying at the age of around 83, 85. Okay, so that's chapter 1. And then chapter 2 is where we start getting into like dream interpretation. So that was just a quick rundown of Daniel's life, because like in verse 21 of chapter 1, it says, and Daniel continued even unto the first year of King Cyrus. So now we're going back to I think this chapter 2 kind of takes you back some period, because I think they were still in training at this time where Daniel had I think. I could be wrong, but I think they were still in training. Yeah, because it says, and in this, okay, so I'm going to read chapter 2. So it said, because remember, they had 3 years of training that the Jewish men had to go through before the king would pick who he was to put in his court. So it says, and in the 2nd year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him. Then the king commanded to call the magicians and the astrologers and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king, and the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king in Syriac. I don't even know what that is. Okay, I'm assuming their own special language. O king, live for tell what is it?
Try Syriac.
Syriac. That sounds
close.
King, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation. And then the king answered and said to the Chaldeans, the thing is gone from me. If ye will not make known unto me the dream with the interpretation thereof, ye shall be cut into pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. But if ye show the dream and the interpretation thereof, ye shall receive of me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. So he's basically saying, I don't remember the dream, but if you are who you say you are, and if you're all magical and all powerful, and your gods are all magical and powerful, you should know my dream. And then they answered again and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will show the interpretation of it. The king answered and said, I know of certainty that ye would gain the time, because ye see the thing is gone from me. So he's like, hey, you're trying to waste time telling me to tell you the dream. I've already told you I don't know it. And so you better tell me, or your heads are going to come off. It says, but if ye will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you. For ye have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me, till the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that ye can show me the interpretation thereof. So unless you could tell me the dream, like, I'm not going to believe your interpretation. So the Chaldeans answered before the king and said, there is not a man upon the earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore, there is no king, lord, or ruler that asked such things at any magician or astrologer or Chaldean. And it is a rare thing that the king requireth, and there is none other that can show it before the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. So they're saying, look, no king has ever asked us to tell the king what he dreamed and the interpretation. The king's always revealed to them the dream so they can interpret it. And so the only one, they're like, the only person that can know what you dreamed is the gods. And the gods aren't made of flesh and blood that can like speak. So how are we to tell you what you dreamed? And so it says, for this cause, the king was angry and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. And the decree went out forth that the wise men should be slain. And they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. So the king's like, okay, that's it. I've had it with you all. And not only was he going to kill off every single magician, astrologer, sorcerer, all these people that he had already established in his kingdom, he was going to kill those that he was training to be in his court, which meant Daniel and the 3 boys' heads were also on the line. And then Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom of Arioch, the captain of the king's guard. which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? Then Arioch made the thing known to Daniel. And Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time and that he would show the king the interpretation. Okay, so he basically goes, look, let me go before the king and ask for more time so that I can try and figure this out. I just need some time. And then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning his secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. So Daniel goes back home and says, boys, we need to get together. We need to pray here because we're going to be dead if God doesn't reveal to us what this dream means. And so God is true, God is good, God is honest, and he revealed to Daniel the dream that night. And then Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. And he changeth the times and the season. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. He revealeth the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who hast given me wisdom and might, and hast made known unto me now what we desire of thee, for thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. So after, this is very important, so after Daniel is given this dream, he gives thanks back to God. He doesn't try to take the accolades for himself. He's like, God, you're the one that gave me this dream, and you're the one that's going to get glory for this dream. And it's not me. It's you giving me this. And then it says, therefore, verse 24 says, therefore Daniel went in unto Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. He went and said thus unto him, destroy not the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show unto the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah that will make known unto the king the interpretation. The king answered and said to Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king, but there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets. So remember when his sorcerers came to him and said, hey, only our gods know, but they don't have mouths. They can't talk, so they can't tell us what you're dreaming. So Daniel comes in and says, well, my God has a voice. My God has a mouth and has told me the secrets of your dream. And so he's showing off the fact that David's God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is more powerful than these false pagan gods. Okay, so I'm just going to read over my notes just to make sure I haven't forgotten anything, because now we're going to get into the dream, which is very cool, but very confusing. So let's see. I said, during Nebuchadnezzar's second year of reign, he had a dream that troubled him. Problem was he could not remember it and lost sleep because of it. The king ordered all of his most educated and well-known magicians, astrologers, sorcerers, and Chaldeans. So the Chaldeans were a semi-nomadic tribe of pagan worshiping diviners who lived in southern Babylon and were highly influential, highly educated. So they came before him and commanded that they tell him what he dreamed and its interpretation. They were confused at his request and asked the king to tell them what he dreamed, and they would surely tell him the interpretation. This made the king very angry. He told them if they were as smart and gifted as they professed, then they should know his dream without being told what the dream was. Unfortunately, no one had the power or talent to do so. This angered the king, for he thought them all to be charlatans and liars. He told them if they would not tell him his dream and interpret it for him, then he would decree a death sentence be placed against every single one of them. The Chaldeans told him that no man had the ability to interpret a dream without knowing the dream first, nor had it ever been asked of them before, that only the gods would know the answer to his question. However, the gods they serve are made of stones, wood, metals, not flesh and blood. Their gods had not the ability to speak and reveal the secrets locked within the king's mind. The king was so mad that he ordered the death of all the wise men, which included Daniel and all the other Judean men being trained in the king's court. Then Daniel went to the captain, asked why all the haste, and the captain answered him and told him what was going down. Then Daniel requested that the king halt the killings and extend Daniel a little time to find the answers to his dream. The king granted this, and Daniel went into his house and prayed with the three boys. Then God's might showed them mercy over their lives by revealing to Daniel the secrets. It was in a night vision and revealed to him what he dreamt and its meaning. And then Daniel gave praise to him for it. Daniel speaks about the darkness and light. Oh, okay. So here's where the interpretation comes in. Okay. So verse 29, as for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed. What should come to pass thereafter? And he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. But as for me, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes, that they shall make known the interpretation to the king, and that thou mightest know the thoughts of thy heart. Thou, O king, sawest and behold. Okay, so basically he's telling the king, as I said before, look, it's not me that's telling you this. It's my God who revealed all this to me. Because I'm no better than any one of your like charlatans. I'm no better than your Chaldeans or sorcerers or something. Any other man, I have no special power. What power I'm being given to interpret your dream is coming from God. In 31, he says, thou, O king, sawest and behold a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay and brake them into pieces. Okay, so he's saying you saw a great image. The head was made of gold, his breast and his arms were made of silver, his belly and his thighs were made of brass, his legs were made of iron, and then his feet were made of iron and part clay, part iron, part clay. And then he saw a stone being cut out of a mountain. Okay. And that stone was then taken and smashed upon the feet that were made of iron and clay. And it broke them into pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together and became like chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Okay, so I got a really cool image. So this is the image right here. So you got your feet made of iron and clay. the legs made of iron, thighs and the waist made of brass, the arms made of silver, and the head made of gold. And then here's the rock, and it's crushing the feet. And what it does is it crushes the feet first, and then it starts to crush every other place on here, every other mineral material. And when he's talking about it pounds them into chaff, this is what chaff looks like right here. So when you're threshing out the wheat and you're hitting it down on the floor, these things fall on the floor, and then they're very, very, very lightweight. So if wind comes, it like blows them away. So he's saying the whole entire statue was crushed down by the stone into lightweight, almost dust. And then a wind came by and carried them away, and that no place was found of them. So there was nothing left of this dust or the statue. So this is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given unto thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. So he's saying, okay, so Daniel, let's see, after the king has done secret. Okay, so here the king saw a great image, a statue, awesome and spectacular in size and form. The head was made of gold. So the gold represents the Babylonian Empire, Nebuchadnezzar and his greatness, all the way through Belshazzar, which is the destruction, which you'll learn later in Daniel. Gold also represents the lion. Then you've got the chest and arms that are made of silver, which is Medes and Persia, Cyrus, David, King Darius. This represents the bear. Then the abdomen and the thighs were made of bronze, and this is the Greece period. Alexander the Great, all the way through Perseus of Macedon. This represents the leopard. Legs of iron is Rome. So you've got all the Caesars, Julius, Augustine, Nero, Titus, all the way through the Justinian one. And this represents the dragon. And then you've got the feet of clay and iron. These are the divided nations of Europe from 476 AD all the way up to present time. And then around 410 AD, the Romans withdrew from Britain. So you see then the entire statue were all crushed into chaff. Wind came and blew it away. The stone used to crush the image was then transformed into a great mountain that filled the entire earth. So herein lies the interpretation. Okay, so we're in 39. So he's saying the gold head represents you, your reign. And excuse me, interesting that he says that God gave you the authority to rule, and to rule with greatness. Like he gave you authority over the birds and the fowl and all this kind of stuff, which if you go back actually into, I think it's 1 Samuel, that's when basically God was their king. Okay, God was the one that they would go to get resolution for things, to keep the moral compass if you will. And he was the one that was giving justice and mercy and stuff. And this is during the time, like after Judges, where they were very wishy-washy, like, oh, God, save me. No, I really want pagan gods. I want to worship them. Oh, God, save me. I want to worship. So in First Samuel, the people go to the priest, which was Samuel at the time, and they said, we want a human God. We want a man as a king to rule over us. We don't want to have to go to God anymore. And God even tells them, these are the things that are going to happen. Like, if you want a man king to rule over you, and then the king will speak directly to me and answer to me, that's fine. But here's a litany of things that's going to happen to you if that's what you want. And it's funny because if you go back and you read that chapter, it's everything we're experiencing now, everything. And this is where Romans 13 comes from. We were never to be ruled over by government or by man. God was to rule over us. And it's so funny because, if ever you want to read this on the side, it's 1 Samuel 8. If you read that, you'll understand how government established itself. But it's pretty awesome. It's pretty amazing.
I have an observation for you, Don.
Yes.
I was looking through, and of course I found this on Wikipedia, but it states how the United States government, the federal government, claims themselves as sovereign. Okay, and I can't find that word sovereign whatsoever in the Bible. And so that's more of a political terminology. And of course, when we hear that phrase sovereign citizen, that's an oxymoron.
The only one that has sovereign is God. Government is given power, authority to rule over the people. But in back in Roman times, that sucked, because whoever was in power, so God as judgment, God's judgment, like after the flood, it's really hard pressed for you to see God like actually send anything down to destroy, except for Sodom and Gomorrah, maybe. But in New Testament, you don't see anything like that happening. And pretty much towards the end of the Old Testament, you're not seeing any kind of like mass judgment of God using nature or whatever to rain down on earth. His judgment is in the form of who's going to rule over your butt. Because if you're doing bad, he's going to send your enemy. If you want to follow bad, if you want to do bad, then he will have bad oversee you. And then you can see what it's like. That to me is what I see as his judgment for us as people. So who just came on?
Hey, it's me, Cindy, but I don't know how to make myself like visible.
Oh, so there should be like a video thing button. So if you just tap on the screen.
Okay.
There you go.
Hi.
Hey, you're not arrow.
So this is Robert.
Hi.
Cindy. So we just went over Daniel 1 and we're almost through Daniel 2, but if at the end of this, I actually want to hear your notes. I am recording this, but we're just now going over the interpretation of the dream. But if you want, actually, I'll go over the dream itself and then we'll go over the interpretation again. But what I'm saying is, like, when Daniel is telling the king, Nebuchadnezzar, that he, God hath given thee a kingdom, a power and strength and glory, and whoso or wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the earth or the heaven, hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them. So I was taking Robert back to 1 Samuel 8, when the people tell Samuel that they want a man king to rule over them instead of God. And Samuel was very saddened by this information. He's like, they're making such a huge mistake, but what am I to do? That's what they want. And God's like, I know. And I'll give them what they want, because man is fallible. And man, when he gets absolute power, is corrupted absolutely by that power. And so I was just telling Robert that he should read 8, because God explains exactly what is God says will happen to us if we have man ruling over us.
Yeah.
It's happening now to the T. It is happening now. This is what we are going through.
Yeah.
And so, and it goes back to Romans 13, when Paul tells us that we have to be obedient to government because God ordained government to rule over us. But when evil governments rule over us, that's because that is our judgment. That is our punishment for not being one with him. And so this also goes into what we do in trying to escape Babylon, trying to, come out of her and not to be in Babylon. Like we can be, we can be in Babylon, but not of Babylon. We don't want Babylon ruling over us. We want to do what Abraham would do when, there would be a famine. He'd go into Egypt, but then he'd come right back out. So, it's just funny that this is, it was not, we were not intended to be ruled over by man. We were intended for God to rule over us, but we said we didn't want him. We want, and that's the stupidest thing that we could have done, but it is what it is. So now we're in the thick of it. So we just went over the dream. So I found this very cool photo. And so I was saying that the head, he's basically, Daniel's telling Nebuchadnezzar that the gold head represents Nebuchadnezzar, but also the destruction of that golden head is his son Belshazzar. And this always confuses me. I'm like, wait, Daniel is Belteshazzar and his son was Belshazzar. So I would always get so confused later on. I'm like, wait, who are we talking about? Daniel? Like Daniel wouldn't do those things. So Belshazzar was a spoiled, rotten brat who did not adhere to David's or Daniel's warnings. But again, that is something we will cross later on in our studies. But so Nebuchadnezzar was the gold head. Belshazzar was the gold-headed destruction. The chest and arms were made of silver, which is the Medes and Persian period, which is King Cyrus, King David, King Darius, and they represent the bear. Then you have the abdomen and thighs that were made of bronze. This is the Greece.
What was the chest and arms made out of, you said?
Chest and arms were made out of silver. I may have said something else, but I meant to say silver.
And that I was taking notes.
Okay. So abdomen and thighs are made out of bronze, and that's the Greek, kind of the Greece rule. And that's Alexander the Great to Perseus of Macedon. And that represents the leopard. And then you've got the legs of iron, which is the Roman rule, which were all the Caesars Julius, Augustine, Tiberius, Caligula, Nero, Titus, all the way through to Justinian, yeah, the first, which ends around 565 AD. And this represents the dragon, because the Caesars were really bad, especially to the Jews and the Christians. They were really, really bad. And as we know, Nero was considered as the first Antichrist. So then you've got the feet of iron and clay, which is the divided nations of Europe, that took place at this round about the start of 476 AD up until the time when Jesus comes, up until present day. And 410 AD, the Romans actually withdrew from Britain. I didn't even know they were in Britain. I was like, really? They were in? So, and then the rock is basically God crushing all those nations. Then the entire statue were all crushed together into chaff. And this is what chaff looks like right here. So when they're doing the wheat, I want to say that they hit it against the ground and then it breaks apart the chaff, which falls and leaves the wheat to be processed. And it's super lightweight. So when a wind comes and blows it, it just blows it. But they wanted to make sure that they understood that it was ground into almost dust. So when wind would come, it would blow it away. And so the stone crushed the image. And after the stone crushed the image, it was transformed into a great mountain that filled the entire earth. And so the interpretation is pretty cool. So we are in Daniel 2, 39, verse 39. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron, the part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. So remember that, okay? And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. For as much as thou sawest the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, and the silver, and the gold, the great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. And then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel, and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto them. The king answered unto Daniel, and said, of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods and a Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, seeing thou couldst reveal it this secret. Then the king made Daniel a great man and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king that he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. Okay, so back to the interpretation. So Daniel expresses how great a sovereign King Nebuchadnezzar is, and that the God of the heavens, Elah of the Shamayim, has ordained Nebuchadnezzar to reign with power, strength, and esteem, that God has given him reign not only over men, but over the animals. So the head of gold represents Nebuchadnezzar's greatness and reign. But you know what they say, that which God gives, he can take away too. So the chest and arms of silver, after Nebuchadnezzar, there will be another kingdom who is inferior to his. And then you got the abdomen and thighs of bronze, is a third kingdom will come to power that rules over all the earth. So remember, up here, the Medes and Persia was not as great as the Babylonian empire. And then you had Greece's reign with Alexander the Great and everything. So you've got the third kingdom will come to power that rules over all the earth. And then the iron was Rome. So all the Caesars. So iron legs is the fourth kingdom, will be as strong as iron, because iron breaks all things into pieces and subdues. However, that kingdom too will break into pieces and be crushed by another. So now you've got the feet of iron and clay. This represents a kingdom divided. It will be partly strong, which is the iron, and partly broken, which is the clay. So here's where I was like, and I've heard other people say this too, so I know I'm not completely on the crazy path. So they could be the fallen angels, the demons, AI, will try to mingle themselves with men. That was the Nephilim, transhumanism, and it will not work. So just as iron does not mix with clay, their attempts at mixing the two different beings, the two different DNAs, will not work.
And you know what makes me, when you said something about mingling, when you read it, it just, to me, it sounded like you were talking about hookup culture. Because that's exactly what happens, right? Like that's exactly what's happening. And then they terminate, and then like they think it's going to work out. Their depression's going to go away. They're more valued, and it just does not work out. That does not work out. So it's very interesting when you said it. I felt like in old terms we were talking about hookup culture. I don't know.
Yeah. Exactly. Then you've got the cut stone without hands, which is God's kingdom. And during the reign of those kingdoms above, the devil's kingdoms, God will build up another kingdom, one that cannot be destroyed, nor will its sovereignty be left to other men to destroy. Amen. So God's kingdom will break apart and consume all the other kingdoms, and it will stand forever. And a kingdom in which Jesus will be sovereign from the time of his first arrival until he returns. God is building his kingdom through the church. Jesus's kingdom will destroy the devil's kingdoms, and he will reign forever. So it's basically, it's setting the scene. And this is why when people read Revelations, they also read Daniel as well in conjunction, because a lot of references in Daniel are, help make sense of Revelations. So then we see that the king prostrated in front of Daniel and praised the fact that he was able to not only tell him his dream, but interpret it. And he gave orders to have an offering and incense be made to Daniel. He also gave glory and honor to Daniel's God, recognizing his God as the one true God who was the revealer of all secrets. And then the king gave Daniel gifts, a royal title, and made him ruler over the province of Babel, and the chief of the nobles and wise men of Babel. And Daniel then requested that he be allowed to appoint Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to oversee the affairs of Babel, while Daniel remained in the king's gate. Now, I did some research on what that means. And so the king's gate was someone of very, very high importance, someone super close to the king. And you would have to go through him and get his approval before you could actually see the king. Which is why a lot of the Babylonians were very jealous of Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because all of a sudden they were given like high honors, overseeing populations. And so they were very jealous. And he was also a private counselor to the king. He was a chief magistrate of the court. So bro got like high accolades and put in very high positions.
Yeah.
And so as soon as he got in there, immediately the people of Babylon were scheming to get him killed and taken out of position.
It's wild.
But Robert, do you have any questions?
I was trying to real quick. Yeah, I noticed something in regards to Daniel when he asked Nebuchadnezzar some more time. It kind of sounds similar to a motion of continuance, to where or he was asking for a little more time to prove his innocence or prove what he can.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, that's how I saw that real quick. But then also that image of what looks almost like a pagan god statue. I saw that on my brother, not my brother physically, blood wise, but my brother in Christ, Preston. He has that same poster on his wall. And I've never read the book of Daniel. It's the first time I've read it. But upon seeing that poster that you got there, that comes from a poster, I remember seeing that. I remember seeing the Persians, the Greece, Babylonian, Rome. Yeah, and this was like 4 years ago actually longer than. I've known him for 10 years. But upon seeing that in one of his office room, I was like, wow, that's interesting. And I didn't, he always tells me to follow the timeline.
Yes.
So that, like I said, I'm very young and ignorant in the Bible. But what's really interesting is everything I've heard and seen, what you've shared with me. I don't know. It just all makes sense to me for some reason.
You're a quick learner, which is what I like about you.
What I like about you,
might be new to it, you're super quick at it and you pick it up very quickly and you memorize it very quickly.
Well, I guess, like I said before to many other people in other groups, I come into the knowledge, but backwards, because I studied a lot of the man's law and, the court stuff, and still learning. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So Robert, it's part of the national stuff that I was talking to you earlier today about, Cindy. And we use a lot of biblical analogies, a biblical history when we have things that we need to deal with in court, because they adhere to, that's where they get their laws, where we get our laws from is from the 10 Commandments, from the Old Testament. It's where we get trust law from, contract law. I mean, the Bible in itself is a contract. Were you guys say?
I was going to say the other thing, like I was sharing with you that Galatians chapter 5, inherit kingdom of God.
Yes.
And that's the air jurisdiction that, I've learned about here in the last year. That's that land, air, and water. So you want to be in that air jurisdiction. That's why, we ask if this is a court of inherent jurisdiction. You ask it 3 times, much like anything else you ask 3 times. And so that's just an observation.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Cindy?
Well, I got through most of chapter 1. I didn't get to chapter 2.
Okay, so give me what you got in chapter 1.
Like, I've been busy with this.
No, I know you've been busy. No worries.
So it was interesting because I like to ask a lot of kind of student-like questions, I guess, like when was Daniel written? Who wrote Daniel? How old was he when he wrote it, kind of thing. And so it's just kind of interesting. I kind of found some stuff that, okay, so it was written around 164 BC, long before Jesus came in the picture. And it's crazy that like you said, it kind of goes hand in hand with Revelation, and we're seeing a lot of that stuff. So to me, it's one of those things where it's like, I know you want to believe that the entire book is a fairy tale, but how did it predict like things thousands of years before? Like, that's one thing for me, you know, like, I don't know, my heart and my mind is always in trying to think like an atheist, to try and answer those questions when I come across them, you know? So that's one thing for me that just doesn't make sense, that it would be a fairy tale with the ability to
Or
predict.
just an analogy, like it's all just, you know, what's the word that they use? It's not supposed to be looked at as history. It's supposed to be looked at as almost like an analogy for life. They're
But
just stories.
But it's
That's
very interesting, because a lot of things that were like, God said nothing will grow here for like ever. Like if you go back and you find that land, nothing grows there. So then it's hard to argue that it's all just an analogy in that sense, right? So that's another thing, which is great. And then I found something very interesting. So PBS gives us a lot of information because they give us a lot of historical stuff, right? So when people try to verify things about the book of Daniel, we go to, you know, who are the ones that people, atheists, agnostics, other religions go and say, well, you know, history proves it. PBS, Britannic Encyclopedia, right? Yeah. So then I was thinking, but okay, so who runs PBS though? Oh, well, it's a public service nonprofit foundation, right? So yeah, oh, okay. So I mean, government only has 14 or 15% to do with it. So, you know, government has no interest in it. So I went to PBS's website, and then I found that 15% of the federal government has their pocket in PBS, right? And then another percentage of the state government, which my picture cut off here, you know, and then businesses, foundations, and universities. Okay. Those are like other 12%, 10%, local government, 3%, we get government again. Okay. And only 31% are individuals. Now, what I found out is that we have a 15%, a 3%, and I think the other percentage is a 10 or a 12%, all government hands in history, right? Then guess who the businesses and foundations are? Good old Bill and Melinda Gates are on there.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Democrat people, but yeah.
So it all
makes so
like
much sense.
And it's like more than like 50% is biased. So when people use these things as resources, there are not non-biased resources that want to discredit the Bible or confuse the history to say that the Bible contradicts itself. So that's where I got stuck, because I was like deep diving in there.
You found a rabbit hole.
I found a rabbit hole. Oh my God. And then I just, you know, I wanted to know more things like, how long did Daniel stay under Babylon's rule? And it said until the first year of King Cyrus. So then I was trying to figure out how long he was in power for. It seems that he was in power for 43 years. So Daniel, it looks like Daniel was there about 41 years working there in Babylon. And I'm like, wow, that's a really long time, you know? So, because sometimes you get stuck in places where you're like, Lord, why do you have me here? And how long am I going to be here? You know? And so I kind of wanted to find that out. How long did Daniel withstand and stick with the Lord? In that time, he did not veer. He stayed with the Lord. And it's just pretty amazing to stay 41 years under working for Babylon and staying pretty like straight edge. That's amazing.
And be thrown into a lion's den.
Yes.
So when did you get that he died? Because I got around 536 BC.
I didn't write it down. Sorry. Yeah.
They said he died around the age of 83, 85.
Okay.
Years old,
yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Yes, and he became king in his 40s, like 40 or something like that. I remember reading that. So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah,
Very.
so because I found out their ages. So when because Daniel was of the seed of King Jehoiakim, and
Mm-hmm.
he was in the king's court or whatever,
With
with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So Daniel, when the boys were taken hostage,
yeah.
and brought into the king's court to be trained for that 3-year period, Daniel was around somewhere between 17, 18 years old. And then the boys, because it called them young men, and of course, Jewish young men, they're only young men after their bar mitzvah at the age of 13. So they had to be somewhere between 13 and 16 years of age. When all this kind of went down, and this in chapter 1 goes over the first year of training. Chapter 2 goes over the second year of training. But as you see in chapter 1, towards the end, it kind of gives a synopsis of Daniel's lifespan towards the end of chapter 1. But then all of a sudden you're right back into Daniel going before the king, telling him of the dream. But then you see it brings you right back into year after the second year reign. So that was their second year of training when the dream stuff came into play. And so and the day that Jerusalem fell, and I actually want to see what Jehoiakim did, because King Jehoiakim was not doing good stuff, because God always crushes the Jewish people and brings them into the hands of their enemies when they're doing bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All through Judges, that's what happens. And so I think I can't remember what. I know I kind of like looked into it a little bit, but I think Jehoiakim was like bringing pagan gods into the temple or something to that effect. And so that's why God allowed King Nebuchadnezzar to overthrow Jerusalem and take their things in the Jewish temple and put it in their pagan temple.
I feel like that sounds about right, because every story I read, they go back to the gods and back to the gods, and he keeps pulling them out. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. And it's like so easy I feel like it's so easy for us to sit here in modern days and be like, Israel.
I know, like, what the heck? Get your act
then,
together. And then you're like, oh, wait.
you know.
Okay. I get it. I'm doing it too. But yeah, it happened on so it happened in the month of Tammuz. And so this is the rabbit hole I went down.
Okay.
Calendar. And Tammuz is the 4th month on the Hebrew calendar. So it happened in this area right here. So the first temple was, what was it? Where was it? Yeah, so Tammuz is the 4th month in the Hebrew calendar. Tammuz 17 begins a 3-week mourning that until the 9th of Av, the fast day that commemorates the destruction of the 2 temples. So 9 Tammuz is when King Nebuchadnezzar breached the walls of Jerusalem prior to the destruction of the first temple. And the Jews would normally fast on the 9th for that destruction of that first temple, but the breaking of the second temple on the 17th of Tammuz, so the day of fasting changed from the 9th to the 17th. But it was on 9 Tammuz, which led me down that rabbit hole, because I'm like, why is a Hebrew month being called a pagan god? Like,
Mm,
that seems so weird. So yeah, I went down that bloody rabbit hole where you see that there's a lot of influence from the Talmud in a lot of their celebrations and stuff, and with the Ashkenazis, like bringing over all this witchcraft ritualistic stuff, and the mystical four worlds for the New Year trees, which is just like pagan worship. It's like total like worship of nature, which is totally satanic,
mhm.
or Luciferian. And so yeah, it's like tree worship. But it originally, it was just really a sign. It was like a almost like a farmer's almanac marker to say, okay, this is when the ground is the moistest and the most fertile. And so, and then after it bears fruit, then we give our first fruits to the temple. And so the Kabbalists came in over the top and created this Seder meal where you have to like recite these words, and you have to eat food and wine and a particular thing. And it's so ritualistic. It's creepy. And they say that it brings human beings in the world closer to spiritual perfection. The only one that can bring spiritual perfection is Jesus Christ, who they constantly deny. But yeah, so
I
that's what
also, I also like going back to like the diet.
yep.
So going out of, it was really interesting to me that, he said no meat and no alcohol, and they were scared that they wouldn't perform well. But I mean, we know what like bread, meat, and alcohol does. Sugars and then carbs, then you're having too much red meat. It makes you fatter, slower, foggier. You're not as good of an athlete, so to speak, right? So that's why like when we compete, we can't have alcohol for such a long time because of the sugars and the carbs. They're just going to slow you down. They're going to fill you up. And so it was interesting that God knew that diet that everybody's talking about, all the fitness trainers talking about right now, thousands of years later, like God knew, and God was like, cut this out and cut that out and just let him see my work. And it's just so amazing how the Bible just proves, like with everything going on, it just proves that it's been knowing what it's been talking about ever since then.
I think I sent you the link to a TikTok video. It's a pretty long TikTok video, but this guy talks about the Adam diet, and
Oh,
how it says something like we're supposed to eat what is it? Vegetables, fruit, and seeds.
mm,
He's like, so you're supposed to eat a peach seed. And everyone's like, what do you mean peach seed? It's like super hard, but it's like a walnut. You have to crack it open and there's a seed inside.
yeah.
And that seed has an amazing amount of nutrients in it. And how he was talking about the nectarine seed, and
Mm,
that there's a particular place like over in Shangri-La, where these people eat, like they eat those nectarine seeds like they're peanuts, and
mm.
none of them have ever had cancer.
Yeah, I totally
Because of the
forgot
seed.
that. I have to get some.
That's
So
B17, I believe, is the vitamin.
Yeah,
B17.
yeah,
Yeah. So I don't know if you know, Robert, but I've been like pretty down. I have an autoimmune issue. So I've been in and out of like doctors, emergency all last week and a half. Pretty much like it started about a month ago, really bad. So I totally had forgotten about that. I should totally take that.
yeah. But here, because I was doing a little studying about the whole diet, because everyone's like, are you doing a Daniel diet or a Daniel fast? But they said that there were 3 potential reasons, and it doesn't have to be just one reason. It could be all 3 of them. But
Mm-hmm.
the reasons that they most likely did not want to eat of the meat and drink
Mm-hmm.
that the Babylonians prepared was, one, the food was most likely offered to their pagan gods. So they didn't want to eat that. Two, the Jews were abstaining from all unclean animals, but the choice meat for the Babylonians was pork. So
Oh.
they didn't want to eat their unclean meat. Three was that Jewish customs, their food is pretty plain when you really look at it. Babylonian, it's like I was telling Robert, it's like us going over to France and eating all of their cheeses and bread and all this kind of stuff. And they just all, or me going to India and eating all their curry and stuff. And my stomach can't take that. My stomach would just react on me. And I would be like, in my bed, my stomach clenching. And so their foods were richer, they were spicier than the simple Jewish recipes. And it would end up giving them an upset stomach, making them feel miserable, sluggish, all this. Because, Jews drank wine, but it was watered down wine.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know, but like pork has a bacteria that if not cooked thoroughly or correctly, like it kills you. It goes to your brain. There's nothing,
Oh, yeah. Yep.
even to this day, there's nothing you can do. So, but here, all the pork is like so synthetic that it's almost not possible that'll happen here. But if you bring it from other countries, it can. So talking about the seed though, the apricot seed, back to that really quick, that's illegal in countries and in states in the United States. That's crazy, right?
They
Yeah.
don't want you to be here. And let
Okay.
me share. I got something for you. Both, Cindy, you had autoimmune, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have an autoimmune, and Don, you had an intestinal gut issue, right?
Yeah, and gut.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of L-glutamine powder?
Yes, I use
Do you
that.
know what L-glutamine do? Okay,
Yeah.
because what it can do is gut lining, and 85% of your immune system is where?
In your gut.
In your digestion.
Yep.
Your gut.
Yep.
So if you have kind of like sensitivities to foods, perhaps for kids, I don't know.
Okay.
All of a sudden people were allergic to peanuts. So L-glutamine, can help. And Don, did you ever receive that health zip file from Private Nobody? Did you receive that? Did he give that to you? Did you pass it on?
I'm gonna say yes, but it was it huge? And I started downloading it and then realized, oh my God, there's so much on there.
Well, there's only like 7 files in there, but one of them happens to be about breast cancer, and it's caused by Epstein-Barr virus. That's the kissing disease, mono.
I have that. I have chronic mono. So if I get stressed, it sparks mono in my body, and it's like I have mono.
Yes. Now, have you been tested for Epstein-Barr virus? There's 60
John
strands.
said, I want you to eat the herbs.
Oops. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I've been tested up and down, and sure enough, whenever I am like so high.
Gotcha. Yes, that's a very good significant factor when one gets stressed out and whatnot, and not feeling well. It just triggers it. Is what it causes. It triggers it.
Yeah, I'm impossible to not be stressed.
Oh, I hear you. Where it says all
I wanted to play this for you.
Kids, eat your vegetables, the fruit, and the seeds. Genesis 1:29. We don't do that much. We eat the hamburger, French fries, and Coke. God said eat the fruit, vegetables, and seeds. When you eat the fruit, you should eat the seed. When you eat a peach, eat the seed. He said, that thing's hard. Well, crack it open with a hammer. The seed is inside the hull, okay? And by the way, there's a good book. A lady saw my seminar, got all excited, went on a Garden of Eden diet, and totally revolutionized her health, and wrote a good book on that, Following the Eden Diet, if you want to get that. Your Right to be Beautiful. But you should eat the seed. Now, be sure to get organically grown seeds, not the ones raised on steroids and pesticides. But the seeds contain a bitter substance called cyanide that'll give you a pucker that'll last about an hour and a half. Some of you old timers are looking at me like, pucker, what is that for? Man, I used to know. My dad says, you know, you're getting old when you get all the way across the room to give your wife a kiss and then you forgot why you came. Yep, you're getting old, Dad. But these seeds contain a vitamin called vitamin B17, which is half cyanide. Oh, that's poison. Oh, it's not either. Hydrogen's explosive. Ask the folks on the Hindenburg, they found out. And oxygen supports combustion. Now, who in their right mind would spray hydrogen and oxygen on a fire to try to put it out? Every fireman on the planet. What do you get if you mix hydrogen and oxygen? Water. Okay. Sodium is poisonous. Chlorine is poisonous. You mix them together, you get salt, which is perfectly wonderful. So the cyanide found in the seeds is mixed with benzaldehyde. Both are poison, but together they're harmless until they bump into a cancer cell. There's a book about this topic called World Without Cancer. Plenty of websites about that topic. If you want to read more, there's a bunch of stuff there on the screen and on my website, drdino.com. There's a tribe of folks in northern Pakistan called the Hunza. The Hunza people never get cancer. When the tribe was first discovered, their average age was 160. This is one of the valleys up there in the Himalaya Mountains. This led to the legend of Shangri-La. How many have ever heard of the Valley of Shangri-La, the valley where you live forever? Well, they didn't live forever, but they lived an awfully long time. The Hunza people's favorite food to eat is apricot seeds. Now, today, they typically live to be about 90. They've had a lot of contact with the outside world. But apricot seeds are kind of interesting. They take the apricot seeds and squeeze them and get oil out of them. They put the oil on their skin, and the women don't wrinkle. They're really good looking at 70 and 80. Hunzas eat these apricot seeds like we eat peanuts. They just love them, and they never get cancer. You know, people that take nutritional therapy to cure cancer have a much better survival rate. Now, they don't all still survive, I understand, okay? But it's about 10 times the opportunity to live than it is from taking the conventional therapies. There's plenty of good books on this topic. Jason Vale teaches you should eat apricot seeds to cure cancer. And he said cancer cannot survive in a body of a person that consumes apricot seeds. Jason Vale simply recommended that people eat apricot seeds, and they arrested him and put him in jail. He's still in jail now for telling people to eat apricot seeds. Because the FDA wants people to take drugs to get well, not seeds to get well, because they can't regulate seeds. They can't make money off of it. It all goes back to money. You know, follow the yellow brick road, the money trail. For years, sailors died of a horrible disease called scurvy. The British Navy lost 1 million sailors to scurvy. Does anybody know how they cured scurvy?
Vitamin C.
Vitamin C. They didn't even know about vitamin C. They just knew if you eat limes, you don't get it. They called them the limeys, didn't they? Take limes on board. Many diseases that we get today are caused by a deficiency of a vitamin. It's not what you're eating that's killing you. It's what you're not eating that's killing you. If you don't get enough vitamin B, you get beriberi, pellagra, rickets. All those are vitamin deficiency diseases. The Bible says God gave herb for the service of man and bread to strengthen man's heart. Did you know bread used to strengthen your heart? But keep in mind, you know, the love of money, root of all evil. They learned years ago, if they take out the vitamin E, the lecithin, and the omega-3 fatty acids, they take them out of the wheat, make the bread with white flour, the bread lasts for months. But the people started dying of heart attacks and strokes and circulation problems. See, it's a simple formula. The whiter the bread, the quicker you're dead. Now, it's not the white bread that's killing you. It's what's not in the bread that's killing you. See, God made bread to strengthen your heart. And if you eat, remember the Bible talked about our daily bread? But people who are making bread to sell got tired of having half of it go bad on the shelf where they couldn't sell it. So they had to figure out a way to make the bread last longer to increase profits. It all goes back to money. Follow the yellow brick road. There are two philosophies of health. One is based upon evolution, which says your body is nothing but chemicals that got together by chance over billions of years. So to treat diseases, you add more chemicals. It's called drug therapy. If you have a headache, you say, doctor, I have a headache. He says, here, take an aspirin. Well, now hold on a minute. What caused your headache? Was it the lack of an aspirin that caused your headache? Are you suffering from an aspirin deficiency? Aren't you treating the symptom instead of the cause? I mean, think about it. See, if you're driving down the highway and the oil light comes on your car, you've got two choices. Find the problem and fix it, unplug the light. You say, you would never unplug the light. That'd be stupid. Yes, I know that'd be stupid. The light's not the problem. The light's trying to tell you about a problem. And believe it or not, your headache is not your problem. Your headache's trying to tell you about a problem. Deficiency in magnesium, maybe, or protein, I don't know. But most of the drugs that we take today are to unplug lights. They're not to fix problems. They're to fix symptoms. And sometimes that's necessary. I'm not against drugs all the time, but I'm telling you folks, we've gone nuts. Drug companies don't make money when you're well. And the love of money is the root of all evil. Most diseases are deficiency diseases. You're low in a vitamin or a mineral or an oil. There are 16 vitamins, 60 minerals, and 3 oils your body needs every day. Just give it plenty, okay? There's a good book by Bill Sardi, a friend of mine in California, called The Power of Healing, The Power of God. We're out of it on the table, but you can order that if you want to study more on health. Or get his other book, The Bible Prescription for Health and Longevity, by Bill Sardi. And before you get excited about them putting fluoride in your water, you might want to read about the truth behind fluoride that they add to our water systems and how dangerous that is. Back in 1845, a doctor in Vienna, Austria, was horrified because 30% of the women giving birth in the hospital died. 30%. So this doctor noted that the doctors would examine the bodies of the women who died and then, without washing their hands, go examine the next expectant mother. They didn't know about microscopic organisms back then. But Dr. Semmelweis insisted the doctors in his hospital wash their hands after examining a dead body. The death rate dropped to 2%. Anybody know what happened to Dr. Semmelweis because of his great discovery? He was fired. 3 hospitals in a row fired him. Finally, he ended up in a mental institution where a patient murdered him. Just for insisting you wash your hands. 3,000 years earlier, in the book of Leviticus, God had told Moses, tell the people, when you touch a dead body, you are unclean, and wash your hands and your body before you touch anybody else. God said that 3,000 years before science figured it out. The other philosophy of medicine is based upon creation, which says your body's designed by God, and he gave us the food to meet our needs, vitamins, minerals, etc. It's called nutrition therapy. We have much more on that on our video series called The Bible and Health, if you want to get a whole lot more on that topic. See, the average number of people that die every year from taking herbs is 0. Every year, about 3 people die from taking vitamins. Every year, about 320 people die from taking over-the-counter drugs. About 9,000 people die from foodborne illnesses. And every year, 90 to 110,000 people die from taking correctly prescribed drugs. This is not counting the incorrectly prescribed.
Yep.
This is those that they told you to take, and you took it and you died. Twice as many as died in the Vietnam War in 10 years die every year from taking correctly prescribed drugs.
So that reminds me of, you guys know the president of Tanzania. Tanzania he had 146 deaths. That's it. And then he said, this is a quote from him, which I think is absolutely hilarious. I love it so much. Let me see really quick. He goes, where is it? Basically, he was, great. Of course, I can't find it. But basically, he was telling people, about COVID, go to church, worship God, because this virus is the devil and your body is the temple of the Lord. While the United States was telling us, you can't go to church, like it was so.
And then our government killed him.
And then our government killed him. And then the next girl, what did she do? Put out your arm.
Yeah.
She brought it in.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It really is just disgusting.
It is. Well, it was so good.
Well, I'm glad that you made it.
Yeah, I was trying to finish up testing with Liam and stuff. He had a few because he was behind a week. So he had like 7 of them, poor kid.
Gosh. Wow.
I know. So we Yeah, we started, right about after you left, like an hour later, we started, and then we've just been poor kid. He gets like all scared, and then I'm like, okay, go take a break, and then we did good.
Have you ladies ever heard of Ezekiel bread?
Yes, I use Ezekiel bread. Yeah, it's the only one I can stomach, I think.
Oh,
I ended up purchasing flour directly from a stone mill, and it doesn't taste the same. My processed flour tastes a little weird.
Yeah.
But you can
Don, I got some.
tell it's real flour.
Yeah, I got one little observation for you, dear. Perhaps for one who comes into the knowledge of the Bible, for one like myself, is still enduring. Your eyes become open. Would y'all agree? Your eyes, you really start to see things. Upon my observation, where I work at right now, in their policy, in their handbook, it says the deductions that are mandated by the federal, state government, stuff like that, being Social Security, Medicare, and then federal taxes, and of course state taxes here in Wisconsin. I've come to find something different, and I think I may have shared with you, Don, in regards to I know this isn't scriptural, but just sharing with you, where it says in this Privacy Act, okay, for Social Security, your information is voluntary. That's what it says. Their own law. And it says the same thing. I found the same code for the federal government. It says if you and your employer, the employer or the employee, wish to partake upon withholding, a W-4 is to be provided, but it doesn't say you have to. And I've got that specific code. I've got the same specific code for Wisconsin here. It says it's voluntary. So one thing you can do, maybe in California, if you're working, if you can find that policy where it says deductions from your paycheck are mandated, they are misinterpreting the law. That's what they're doing. And you can either try not to get contention with them, just say, hey, listen, upon my findings through our creator, he's opened my eyes and say, hey, look, it's been brought to my attention that perhaps your policy in your own handbook for the company here is misstating and misquoting the government law. But you want to talk to like the CEO or whoever high up, because they're the ones who are going to make the
the final decision. Well, it's they always say it's voluntary, now give it to me. That's their
voluntary
compliance. It's voluntary, give it to me now.
So it's passive aggressive.
It really is.
That's what they call voluntary compliance. That's that oxymoron.
It was just like the choice they gave us, like quit work or get vaccinated. It's a choice. We're giving you a choice. You're the one deciding. It's just passive aggressive. And so it's so much BS. And a lot of women who were like, well, you had a choice. You could have quit your job if you were that crazy about it. I'm like, well, it's kind of like when a man holds a knife to your throat and he says, hey, let me rape you or I'll slit your throat. I'm like, how do you feel about that? You had a choice, right? No, we can't blame the victim. That's not a choice, right? So why is it only for one scenario that they're forcing it, but the other scenario, it's not forced. It was forced. It's just crazy because people just pick and cherry pick.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I've got one last thing for you, ladies. You mentioned that just a minute ago, Cindy. I met a wonderful lady in Canada who was a pilot, and of course, she chose not to take the vaccination. This is Air Canada, by the way. She flies one of those big 777 Boeings, the big ones, and she did not partake in that vaccination. However, they rehired her.
Oh yeah,
because now they've got to have one unvaxxed and one vaxxed. For the life of me, I don't understand why. However,
at all times.
Yeah. So she was there. I was speaking at this event, and she shared with me her endeavor there, and I applauded her. Said, I'm right there with her. I didn't take the vaccination when I worked for Home Depot. They were like, yeah, you got to do it, Robert. Oh, screw you. No.
Yeah. I was like, I'm willing to lose my job. It's fine. God will provide. I was like, I'm good. I was like, I would rather be jobless than, no, it's just not. It's not an option.
You know what I feel like, real quick, ladies? I feel like it's coffee talk with Dawn and Cindy.
Love that.
Fluffy. It's
Yeah.
like butter, you know?
There you go.
It's
Talk
so
amongst-
funny. Yeah. YouTube is like Sense and Truth Talk. So it's like originally it was gonna be like coffee chat with Cindy, and then I just
That's funny.
so.
You see how
We'll talk, we have a little coffee. It'll
talk
be
about-
like butter. I just need the long nails, the long
There
thick nails.
and the glasses with the string beads on them.
Yeah. We should
Oh.
get those for these.
Me too.
Well,
Well,
thank
ladies,
you guys for coming. I appreciate it. It's always fun to share.
It
God's-
is. Keep me
yeah.
posted. I pray that I'll be feeling better. I'm on the Plaquenil right now, the hydroxychloroquine daily. So I don't know. I'm gonna try it out for a little bit and then try to wean off again and try to take the apricot seeds and just I'm praying to God that my body makes a miracle here.
Yeah, ask you something real quick. Can you stomach honey, lemon juice, real lemon juice, and green tea, hot green tea?
Oh
With-
yeah.
have you
So
done that?
I do honey and garlic. So my husband does a little syrup and he lets them kind of sit for days and then it's a table. So
I tell you
yeah.
what,
Man.
Don, did you get that zip file from Private Nobody? If not, I'll send it to you to send to Cindy.
Oh yes. I'll
Yeah, you're gonna need to send it to me because I'm not sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I'll send it. So Cindy, it's gonna be a zip file, okay? And open it up because the first thing that caught my eye was that cure for cancer, breast cancer specifically, being that that's the Epstein-Barr virus, which is mono. There's 6 of it, okay? And he talks about how you can heal from it.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Don't thank me. No. That's me.
Well, thank you for sharing it.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'll send it to Don. And
Okay, sounds
Awesome.
good. Thank you guys.
awesome.
Thank
bless
you.
Guys.
God bless you too. Ciao.
Bye.
Easy.
Good night.